What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here. Recently had the chance to go and play some golf, and want to show you guys a few of the lessons that I learned along the way. Really thought that was going to go a lot better. How you doing today, Seth? Are you having a good one?
So catch me if I fall.
So, as we said in the intro, recently had the chance to go and play golf at a local course. And so getting out there, I thought it was really interesting. I've spent a lot of time here on the channel coaching folks, and especially beginners, in terms of like mental strategy while you're out there on the course. Because while I think that learning technical skills and how to approach and things like that is super helpful and definitely stuff that we're covering here on the channel, I think that because disc golf is inherently so simple and we can score quickly so much easier, such as it being not so far-fetched that, especially if you pick the right courses, in your first year of disc golf, you could definitely shoot under par. Whereas in your first year of playing golf, as well as I'm sure there are loads of people who've been playing golf for years that have never shot a technically full under par round. So I certainly don't pretend to be pretty good at playing golf, because when I went out this weekend, I shot a 111. So let that be what it is. But I walked into this round of golf with a different mentality, trying to take some of the lessons that I try to teach in disc golf and apply them to golf, since, you know, it's the parent sport, sister sport, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to play a few holes of disc golf today while discussing golf. And we're actually out here testing 4 new discs with 3 new molds during this round. For putting today, we're going to be testing out PA3s and 300 plastic, so super excited about that. I think these feel really good in my hand. I've heard a lot of talk about the PA3, and while I've thrown a premium plastic one, I've never actually putted with the base plastic ones. So excited to see these today, especially because at the time of filming this, they just announced the Prodigy NHL partnership, and I definitely ordered 2 Minnesota Wild black PA3s. And then for throwing, we're actually going to be trying out the Passion. Can't be a foundation member without at least experiencing the Passion, so trying this out. We've got a couple other plastics of the Passion coming on the way, and then I have this Vandal from Dynamic Discs. I think the Vandal gets missold as what it actually is, so excited to try these two neck and neck. Now for this video, it makes a lot of sense to pair the white Vandal with the white PA3 and the pink Passion with the gray PA3, so we're gonna keep those two kind of putting and battling off one another. But when it comes to golf, I think there is a certain understanding of what is the most difficult parts of golf. And a lot of people will say that the short game is definitely the most difficult part of golf, and the long ball or getting off the tee shouldn't be that difficult, especially if you approach it with the right mentality. A lot of people's golf swings are not developed to hit the big stick, and yet we're tempted to get out there and just swing the driver over and over again. And I think there's a similar correlation between disc golf, where we are inclined to step up to the bigger distance drivers like the Destroyers, when in reality our arm speed might be better equipped to throw something like the Sting or even like the Hex or the Dune or something along those lines. Knowing that I tell people all the time that don't step up to the faster disc, I did walk into this round telling myself I was originally going to hit the 7-iron as my fastest club all day. While I know that it could lead to boring golf, I wanted to make sure that I was playing sort of chip to the middle of the fairway, chip, be good, here we go. I don't feel like my swing was terrible, and so when we got to the driving range for me to like loosen up a little bit, I tried out the 5-iron, and I actually was hitting the 5-iron pretty well as well. So I decided to adjust my game plan before we even got out there, that I was going to be hitting the 5-iron and the 7-iron, sort of going around those two. So we're going to go for the yellow basket here. And when thinking about swinging a golf club, the first parallel that really stood out to me was when I tried to grab my golf club and absolutely just murder that ball, like come through and just whack. It didn't go well pretty much ever. And I think the same thing comes true for golf when we are on the tee box and we're trying to throw these shots. If I try to just overpower and smash the disc, it never seems to go as well as sort of trusting the smoothness of my mechanics in hitting. That's not meant to say that we can't throw fast or we can't throw hard, but simply throwing hard doesn't usually produce the results we want to. A quick swing in golf, whoop, and a quick swing in disc golf, I think actually both produce decent results. Okay, so So we probably needed to throw that on like some anhyzer at all and not straight into the ground. But coach has me working on footwork right now, and so I was so focused on that that I didn't actually do anything with my arms. So not a fair throw to the passion to get us started. Oh yeah, there's that grip lock we've been having. I'm gonna go pick that one up and restart this. I'm gonna go pick that one up and rethrow. I will say that there's already fear creeping in that I'm not ready to be on the course with this throw yet. Okay. Much better. Now, while I am trying to test out these discs, this is not a situation that I would use really either of these for, so I'm going to continue to get practice in. Perfect. So generally my strategy of hitting the 5-iron or the 7-iron off the tee worked pretty well. I would say out of 18 tee shots, I probably only had 2 or 3 go awry and put me like way off the fairway. What is interesting is, like most golfers, oh, that would have been a really cool little start for the PA3. People say the PA3 has like no glide on it, but just giving it a chance there. So, like most players, I was standing up on the ball in the past, and so I had a pretty nasty slice to it, and I had a correction, and so I stayed in the ball and really even focused on turning my hands a little bit, which caused me to have a draw or a hook. I don't know if that's the right words, but I was pushing a lot of stuff left, more left than I ever had in the past. So that was certainly a new miss for me, but also just thinking to myself to go down to the slower clubs or the 5 and the 7-iron, I actually was making pretty good contact every time, which was shocking. A lot of wasps out here doing their thing today. Chances of getting stung are very high. But that definitely brought us to our first problem of playing, was my lack of understanding of how far I hit each club. When you're walking into a shot, and like I was playing with 2 guys who usually shoot in the high 70s or low 80s, and they're walking up and they're like, all right, yeah, this is how far I hit this club, and they had the little Bushnell thing on the cart that was like, hey, you're X amount of yards away from the basket. That information was completely useless to me. In fact, it was a little overwhelming sometimes of being like, okay, I'm this far away, so I think I'm supposed to hit this club. I had genuinely no idea how far I was really hitting my 5-iron, how far I was hitting my 7-iron. It was truly just kind of a feel, and not having that information makes it really hard to make decisions on the course. For instance, on one of the par 5s, I actually had I was middle of the fairway, and then I hit another shot up and I was middle of the fairway, and they were like, Robbie, okay, the creek that runs just in front of the like green, it's downhill to this, so it's a very gettable par 5. They were like, most people's second shot is actually gonna have them up like in the middle of this hill or even rolling down. And I was at the top of the hill, and they were like, yeah, Robbie, it's, I can't remember how far they said, to the water, so you can like just swing and lay up, but be careful because the water might be in play. And I was like, I'm gonna be pretty happy if I make it to the water, because I mean, I hit this ball pretty stinking good. Sure enough, what happened? I had the ball pretty stinking good, dropped it straight in the water. So that's an OB stroke, that's another ball. So I kind of liked the simplicity of saying, hey, I'm not gonna hit the big stick, I'm not gonna throw the driver, I'm just gonna hit my irons over and over again. And if it looks like, okay, trouble is straight or trouble is wherever, I'll step back to my 7-iron and hit that. So I think that the simplicity off the tee actually made me have the chance to score really well that day. Because like I said, there were very few drives that were not actually like where I wanted them to be. But that does take me to something that I think in disc golf is definitely true versus golf, which is having tools in your toolbox, especially when you're not in an ideal scenario or an ideal lie. We're trying to flip it up past that basket that's kind of straight and go off to the left. There's the bells because we're here at George Ward. Okay, that was super nose up. But that Vandal does have some easy flip to it. Okay. That particular passion is not flippy at all. Like, at least with everything being slow where I'm at right now, is because we're drastically focused on posture. We're focused on here, feeling that brace, things like that. My upper body is not doing anything remotely what it's supposed to, but that's fine. So this is something that I feel like if you are a beginner in golf, you don't have the skills to throw from uncomfortable scenarios or even really try to switch up how you can hit the ball. It's very simple. Here's the ball. I'm gonna do everything in my power to make sure that my swing is somewhat the same that when I hit it straight the last time. And when you're playing disc golf, it can be a very similar vibe of I'm just throwing the backhand and I just wanna make it as straight as possible. Sometimes you end up in a scenario like this where let's say that I wanted to throw the backhand again. All right, cool. That's tough. So I'm gonna have to throw it like out and around, or I'm gonna have to switch it up and throw the forehand here. In golf, I would get off the fairway just a little bit. So I would be where I wanted to be. But like I said, I was hitting like a draw or a hook or whatever. And so I would get a little bit more roll. And so I was never necessarily dead middle of the fairway, but I would be off to the side. And then I'd have like a little bit of an overhanging limb or something. Like let's say I'm like right here. That tree's clearly not in my way, but if I'm trying to make my way up the fairway and I get any loft on this ball whatsoever, which I definitely was gonna get hitting like a 7-iron, then these trees suddenly get in the way. So I didn't really have the shot shaping ability in order to get around. So one thing that was very helpful is if I had the ability to even like understand how to hit like a punch ball where I could just hit it low like a little zinger, or if I had the ability to know like, all right, here's how I'm gonna put intentional slice on the ball, yet I'm going to not make it slice immediately. So like if I'm right here and I want to get around this tree, I could like make it so it like pushes and then slices later. A little bit of shot shaping mentality or theory goes a long way. So if you're playing disc golf and you find yourself here, I feel like you can mess around with the flight of the Frisbee a whole lot more and a whole lot easier than you can in golf, just because it's A, easier to track this versus watching a little white ball fly, and B, if you have more Frisbees, you can mess around with this even in your backyard. You can't mess around with trying to punch a slice if you're not at a driving range. Most people don't have this kind of space in their backyard to whack a bunch of golf balls. The ability to scramble and throw shots like that, honestly, really helpful, and something that if you're getting into disc golf, building your scramble toolbox, super helpful. You don't have to be throwing 300 feet, 200 feet on these scramble shots, but just the ability to progress up the fairway a little bit, super helpful. Now, speaking of skill sets that I didn't have developed, there are these things in golf that are not really honestly replicated in disc golf at all, and that is sand traps. I understand that in disc golf we try to make like the hazard or the bunker rule or something like that, but in golf, when you're in the sand trap, you don't hit it like a traditional thing. I watched a multitude of players try to do this, and some of them like nestled on the ground, others were like digging their way in, so that way I guess they were lower than the ball, and they were hitting like this full swing, because you wanted to get a hold of the sand, but you didn't want to just hit the ball, because if you just hit the ball, because the ground was so shifty, it was just going to fly. Definitely saw that happen. But it was also tricky because most of the time the sand had like a little bunker up top. So I had several times I landed in 3 different sand traps, and those sand traps cost me quite a few strokes every time, because I would, sure enough, I would hit the ball and get it, but it would barely move at all, and then it would land on the edge of the sand trap and then just roll its way back in. So another technique or area that, man, I thought I could swing properly and save a stroke, but most of the time it ended up costing me multiple strokes. I think a similar thing can be applied here in disc golf, where I'm close enough to the basket that I should be able to, let's say, throw in a approach. I can hit that little Annie approach again. Boom, we're right next to the basket. Or if I don't have the technique and I'm standing here, and instead of throwing an approach shot, if all I know is how to hit the ball one way, which is what happened in golf, in the sand trap, I just go to try to do a normal throw. And now I'm way past the basket, and it's taking me at least 1 extra stroke to come backwards at it. It's just those little subtleties of knowing how to adjust your stroke so that I'm not just throwing the same way over and over again. When you figure out those little differences, and I truly believe that it's easier to find those little differences in disc golf than it is in golf, it saves you so many strokes while you're out there. Okay. Okay. It's definitely not as deep as my daggers. Ugh. But I'm okay that it isn't as deep because it definitely feels like my fingers are getting more involved in the putt. Gives me a lot more power. I bet those band hits would be coming not because of the glide of the disc, but because I'm just literally getting more pop on them. Speaking of pop, that is probably the area that cost me the most strokes while I was out there on the course, was approaching with wedges. I mean, at least 4 different times I grabbed my pitching wedge and I'm looking and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm just gonna come underneath this. I've been to Topgolf before. I'm gonna pop it up in the air and we'll be good to go. But remember what I said earlier about I was making more contact than I thought I was? I don't know if it's because I embrace the like, I don't have to crush this ball thing and I was just swinging so loose. There is not one time that I hit my pitching wedge and actually landed on the green. Every single time I would come through and just go smash. I would hear really cool contact. I would be like, wow, that was such a good hit. And then I would look up and it would just keep sailing and like, come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me, right over the green. 2 times I sailed over the green and found OB behind the basket, so that's unfortunate. And by OB, I mean I literally lost the ball, so I had to drop a ball because apparently like woods right behind the green is a thing. I would say almost every time that I had to pull a 60-degree wedge out, a sand wedge or a pitching wedge, I was guaranteed adding at least 3 strokes. And I had to do that on probably no less than 12 holes. Now the translation to disc golf is I didn't throw far enough to reach most greens in regulation. So I was throwing, or I was hitting my ball to a point, hitting my second ball to a point that I was in approach range. So while the tee shot strategy was working out, having the ability to approach and close out the rest of the hole without losing strokes, kind of like what we talked about on the last hole, super important. Okay. You are flippier than I imagined. Yeah, no. I mean, that passion's kind of dirty, bro. I'm throwing the Vandal better on a backhand because it's flippier, so that makes sense, especially my hand speed being slow. But that passion is, that's nice. Now, there was one chipping or approaching strategy that ended up being pretty stinking helpful. And I'm willing to admit that I probably live under a rock when it comes to golf tips and tricks. I try to watch some like golf channels and teaching and things like that to see once again if I can learn to like be a better golfer and how we can translate that to disc golf. If you guys have played golf, or if you've never played golf and you're like me and you struggle with wedges, let me tell you about the bump and run. Here's how the bump and run was explained to me. And once again, I'm probably offended a lot of golfers at this point in the video already, but like, trying to learn and teach, bro. So the bump and run is you take like an 8-iron or a 9-iron, which is not so like a wedge would be, a little more smash the ball forward kind of deal. And you're gonna putt with it, but not from the putting green. So you're gonna be like way back here and you're gonna wind it up like a putt and you're gonna smack the ball. And what it's gonna do is if you do it right, it could get like a little bit of lift out of it, but it's not just gonna like smash the ball forward, and it's also not gonna smash the ball up. It's gonna get the ball rolling. because that is a beautiful part of ball or golf in general. The ball, once you get it rolling, that can help you quite a bit. So I've been thinking about like, the bump and run made approaching so much easier. Once we took a par on hole 12, I started really leaning into the bump and run for my approaches, and I actually saved a ton of strokes. I stopped taking double bogeys from hole 12 and on, just a bunch of bogeys to round it out, which to shoot the golf that I wanted, which was under 100, bogey golf was really what I was looking for. If you're getting into the game, don't try to take the course as it is for par. Set your goals to be realistic, and under 100, you can literally, if you want to shoot under 100, you can bogey every single hole. That's where I got to thinking. I think the bump and run of disc golf is grabbing an overstable putt and approach disc and throwing it on hyzers, because I can just throw it out here on a simple stroke and know that the disc is going to do the work for me every time. I can bump and run, I can boom, hit it out. So that was super fascinating to me, like kind of making this connection, and why I think and try to lean people towards these overstable putt and approach discs so early. Now, obviously that wasn't great, but the next step up is like throwing the straight approaches and whatnot. Okay, that wasn't it. Try again. There we go. Yeah, throwing the straight approaches versus the overstable approaches can be a huge game changer. Just like I'm sure that learning how to use your wedges instead of having to find a way to bump and run and do all that other stuff, super, super helpful. First circle 2 make with the PA3. Let's see what we can do. Okay, nope. So that takes us to our third and final point of learning, which honestly, this is probably going to get people, if you're already not offended as a golfer, this is where I'm probably going to offend the most people. Let's talk about putting. I've already admitted that I struggled mightily in terms of the wedges and approach game and whatnot. So putting, I expected to be pretty hard, because we'll even say that just like disc golf, or just like golf, in disc golf, putting is one of the hardest things, especially when we think about it incorrectly, which is the correct way to think about putting is simply I'm just tossing a disc into the basket. That's all I'm doing. I know in personal conversations I had with Josh, he's mentioned that like if you handed him pretty much any other object other than a disc and asked him to putt from certain ranges, he'd be lights out. And I think a lot of you are the same. If you just had to toss a Nerf football or a baseball or something and the basket could actually catch those things pretty easily, you wouldn't even think about it. It would just be boom, toss it in there. But what I see happen a lot in disc golf is when we are far away from the basket, we are telling ourselves like, okay, cool, I've got to make this putt. If I find myself 25 to 30 feet away from the basket, especially as a beginner, I'm like, oh, I got to run this. And so then I give it some like stab or some big hit and it sails way past the basket. Now, I'm going to lose multiple strokes to the putting green because of that. This has got to go big hyzer. This is definitely not the disc to get to that silver basket. The yellow basket's obviously straight ahead, but these discs are not. I mean, we could go big spike hyzers. Let's go big spike hyzers. Drop. Okay. So walking onto the green for golf, I was telling myself pretty much every time, understand how the par system works. In disc golf, the way the hole is set up is that traditionally you are to have one shot for the drive, one shot for the approach, and one shot to putt. We're not reading greens or things like that. And the like short case scenario, I guess you should have one shot to drive, one shot or two shots to putt. Golf, you get two shots to putt built into the par. So on a par 4, you're supposed to drive into the middle of the fairway, chip onto the green, putt, tap in your par. So that's what I was thinking, was every time that I get on a green, I have 2 strokes built into this hole. And embracing that mentality actually was super, super helpful. Oh, Dennis, brethren, we let that go so early, bro. Like, so afraid of the grip lock on hole 1 that we just said, nah. Now, when we think about 2 putts or 2 strokes giving me the option, we'll go to this Vandal here because it was further away from the basket. If I'm on a golf green, while I am about 45, 50 feet away from the basket right here, that would be really, really like, I mean, you hit this kind of putt in golf, legend. Sign this man up for the tour or go to Vegas right now. In disc golf, what's happening is because putting is so much infinitely easier in disc golf, I have moments like this where I'm not going to do this. I mean, we'll try to do it with a PA3 and then we'll pick it up. But I'm stepping up and I am trying to make this every day of the week. Bang, lesson learned. No, not enough. See, I'm trying to make that and knowing that based on my putt, which is more of a push putt that goes up and then goes down, I'm going to be right there. But I'm trying to make that putt. I would say that in golf, everyone's more like a spin putter because the ball's literally spinning. But you're going to sail past the basket every time. And if I tried to embrace that mentality while attacking the basket for being right here, and I tried to zip it at the basket, most often what was going to end up happening is I'm going to be way past it, or if I'm afraid of being way past it and having a comebacker, I'm going to actually barely tap it and end up pretty short. And for some people, this is like a tester range. And then I may end up losing strokes to the hole anyways here on this tester range. So I wanted to make it my goal in golf to 2-putt every time, because that is what the course is built in. And I think that's something we need to embrace in disc golf is if you're far enough away from the basket, you don't feel like you can actually make it, just simply, you can lay up, learn a push putt, learn the dad putt that Simon Lizotte called it, come underneath, let it be high. You tried to give it a chance, but boom, it's right there under the basket. And you saw it was a little short there, so we can give it a little more ump. Boom, put it in the chains. Make the stroke, get it in there, and allow yourself to say that I'm never, especially in disc golf where putting is so much easier, never allow yourself to do more than a 2-putt. Because if you do that, you're gonna lose. Like, those are the strokes that you're gonna remember more than anything. Thankfully, I only 3-putt 3 times, I believe, while I was out there on the course. And because of that, I know exactly where I lost most of my strokes, which was in the wedges. With all that being said, I really love the complications that golf brings. I loved the variability, how much thinking was involved. If the pin location was on the front of the green versus the back of the green. What was the green sloped like? So I knew that if it's on sort of, let's say, a downhill putt from the pin, honestly, I probably wanted to land low so I could putt uphill at it versus having to like just tap the ball and hope that I read the downhill enough. So many little micro decisions to be made inside of golf, and I think that disc golf doesn't feel like that depending on the skill level you're at, paired with what course you're playing. If you're a newer player and you're playing a super easy course, then there probably feels like minimal decision making because, once again, it comes down to that par issue. Whereas in golf, you're looking at par, like every par includes 2 putts. Putting is so much easier here that like we don't necessarily need those 2 strokes. So you kind of have 1 stroke to play with on par because most of the time par can feel relatively soft in disc golf. But if you're playing a course that matches your skill level or is even a little more difficult, that's where decision making comes in, because you're not going to be reaching the greens every time in regulation, and because of that, you have some decisions to make. These are just a few of the lessons that I learned in my weekend of getting out there and playing golf. I was fascinated by it. I don't think that financially I really see myself becoming a golfer anytime soon, because while it was fun, I have to admit that the cost to fun ratio just wasn't necessarily there for me. But lots of valuable lessons learned, and I really do think that it definitely like highlighted some coaching strategies that I really like leaning into. Gave me a whole new appreciation for how we're going to teach the game of golf, whether it involves discs or a stick and a ball, however it may be. So if you find yourself as a regular golfer, I would love to know what are some of the thoughts and things that you see from golf translate over to disc golf in terms of this skill. I learned this skill here and I think it's actually helped me with X part of my game. Love to hear that in the comments. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this little soiree into the experiment, and I hope you guys have an incredible rest of your day. Make it fantastic for someone else too. Final report, PA3s are nice. At the time I'm filming this, I have an unsanctioned tournament this weekend, so probably not gonna mess around with these anymore this week, but definitely wanted to go ahead and get used to them. I can definitely see the value of these. Probably give them a chance after this tournament this weekend and really try to dial them in and see what we can do with them. And I think you guys figured it out. I bet this is, from talking to Brody, this is a more overstable run of passions anyways, so I'd be curious like to pair it up against, this is a Fusion Vandal, what would be like the more common comparison between the two. But I like this for the backhand. However, like I said, this is dirty on a forehand, so definitely a weird rim shape, but I get used to it. What are your thoughts on these two? Let us know in the comments below. Anyways, hope you have a great rest of the day. Make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're gonna leave you with the birdie.